everyone, and welcome to a new video series in the Apache CloudStack YouTube channel, CloudStack Integrations. As you know, CloudStack is a multi-hypervisor, multi-tenant, high-availability cloud management platform. And in these videos, we will present a range of technologies with which CloudStack is integrated and can become part of your technology stack. Today, we're meeting Boyan Ivanov, the CEO of StorPool Storage, and we're here with Giles, a chairman of CloudStack European User Group and PMC member. Hi, Boyan, and hi, Giles. Welcome to the video.
Hi, Yvette. Hi, audience.
Would you like to introduce yourself with a few words?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you did a pretty good job there, Yvette. I'm Giles Sirett. As you say, I'm a committer and PMC member of the Apache project, have been of the Apache CloudStack project, have been for the last 8 years. My day job is running a company called ShapeBlue with the CloudStack company. Excited to be talking about storage with Boyan today.
Boyan, your turn.
Sure. My name is Boyan Ivanov. I'm the founder and CEO of StorPool Storage, and we're a storage company that delivers software for mission-critical clouds, and we've been active in the CloudStack community for about 5 years now, maybe a bit more, and we have some very interesting customers and users that we're helping out with CloudStack and seeing quite a few things in the ecosystem.
As we all know, storage is actually a critical part when companies are building their infrastructure as a service. So let's discuss how and why it affects the reliability and performance of the end user system.
I think storage is storage is one of the 3 components of a cloud or any service or any application that's running on top of the IT infrastructure. So you have storage, compute, and network. Since storage is holding all the data, it affects the entire performance of the cloud, also the reliability, this uptime of the system. So, just from this fundamental function, it's very impactful on the applications that are running on top. Of course, if it's a well-integrated storage solution with the given software stack that the customer is using, that becomes even more important because it can extend to features like business continuity, disaster recovery, backup, quality of service, and a lot of other things. So all in all, it's one of the things that make or break a cloud and a service.
Yeah, I mean, I would extend that. When I say it's the #1 thing out of the 3 components. Obviously, if you haven't got a network, you're going to struggle with your storage. But from experience of helping customers run these IaaS environments, I hate to put a number on it, but let's call it 70–80% of the time of any fundamental issues always comes down to the storage. It's the storage that presents the bottlenecks potentially if it's not done correctly. It presents the storage limitations. So getting the storage right, I think, is arguably the most important part of those 3. And it's not immutable like hosts like the compute, right? Storage is running in an IaaS environment. Ultimately, most of them are still based on some sort of hypervisor, some sort of virtualized layer underneath. Those virtual machines have got to run somewhere, and they're running on that storage. So if that storage isn't around, nothing's running right.
And there are so many storage options currently on the market. Can you make something like a comparison? What types of storage are currently available, and how actually companies can choose the best option for them?
I can take that one, if you like, Giles.
I'm sure you can.
I can start with. So I think there is no simple answer. I think there is no the best storage. Depends on the use case. Depends on what the company is trying to achieve. Is it a backup solution? Is it focused, let's say, primarily on files? So that would depend on what would be the best solution for that use case or for that need. Apart from that, the solutions that we see on the market, we're a software company. We see that a lot of the projects that are coming in the last couple of years are looking for software first solutions. That's not only in storage, by the way, of course, that's also in networking, for the other parts of like hypervisors. And, if you think about containers, it's always software first. So that's one thing that we see, and that's because of the flexibility of the solutions. It's very malleable. It allows you to do online reconfigurations. It allows you to leverage commodity hardware. So that's what we see, a preference for customers. I think that's a big change compared to, let's say, 5 years ago when people were still looking at appliances. That's one thing. The other thing would be quality of the solution. So how good is the product in itself? How good is the wrapping around it? Like the support, the response times, the service quality of the team. That would be another thing for companies to look into. Capabilities of the solution itself, besides its quality, is it fast? Is it reliable? What is the uptime? What are the reviews of that product in the online community or in the particular user, let's say CloudStack user group, and so on and so forth. I think these are all important considerations. I think one of the less important considerations is price, because in the end, if the solution is crappy and it loses your data, well, what's the price for that? So we've seen also some, maybe two distinct sets of customers and users. One that are looking for the cheapest solution on the market, and one that are looking for the best solution on the market, and they don't overlap basically. So that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah.
What is your observation, Giles, in the CloudStack community?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Boyan on many points there. I mean, the traditional thing of storage, scalability, price. I mean, they're all still there, right? And I agree. There's always going to be a curve there between two of those and the other one being price. But almost, for any storage, those three things are going to be considerations. Specifically in the CloudStack world, where we're trying to orchestrate storage, there are a set of sort of supernumerary considerations on top of that. Scalability gets more interesting because one of the things, particularly with cloud providers, is the ability to scale horizontally really, really quickly. Or not. That's the other point, is everybody sets off on their journey of building a big IaaS cloud and thinking, hey, we're going to be at this scale within 12 months. They're often not. So scalability is often a commercial thing as well, right? So how, whilst maintaining that price point, can I scale? And obviously performance and everything like that. The other thing we look for from the CloudStack world is the ability to orchestrate storage. So, simple example is, managing the IOPS. People want to sell service offerings, particularly the service providers or internal private cloud use cases. They want to be able to give people a certain number of IOPS and give them burst capacity and that sort of stuff. And unless we've got a storage platform that's got a good, well-maintained RESTful API that we can orchestrate from CloudStack, then we're not going to get as interested in it. I mean, overwhelmingly, we tend to say from the CloudStack side, it supports a whole range of storage platforms. Is it anything that can present NFS? And there is often a conversation in organizations around, whatever their incumbent storage is. If they've got existing skill sets and commercial relationships, there is often a case to stay with that. But that has to be balanced with the other points I'm making, that, sometimes in terms of the functionality they want to present to their users, or from the viewpoint of the scalability, they just can't do it with their existing legacy platform.
Do you both think that the choice of storage pretty much depends on the size of the company? And do you see any differences between the needs which enterprises are having and the needs which small and medium businesses are having?
It shouldn't do. It shouldn't do, philosophically, because a startup today could be the next AWS tomorrow, or the next Google Cloud tomorrow. So, certainly on the service provider side, no, not massive, apart from maybe that thing I was talking about earlier in terms of having those incumbent relationships. Yes, into the enterprise world, people, start to have a lot of legacy policy around data retention, around backup and stuff like that. So there's a lot more restrictions often in those larger enterprise organizations about, you know, the sort of functionality, the sort of boxes they need to see ticked from a storage platform. Boyan, I'd be interested to see your view on that.
It's a level below. I think what you say is true, it's correct, but from our point of view, it's more nitty-gritty stuff. So the small companies, the large companies, they basically would use the same API calls. So if you have a well-integrated solution with CloudStack, both a small or a large company, be it an enterprise or a public cloud, they will both use quality of service. They will do also snapshots and calls, and they will do some backup and disaster recovery. Maybe a bit of difference in the hypervisors they will choose. We see legacy deployments more on Zen server now going to XCP-ng, but a lot of the others are running KVM. But besides that, pretty much they overlap on all the things that you would expect a modern IT organization to use, both large and small.
And are there any storage capabilities which are must-haves for all types of companies?
Yeah, I would say reliability is feature number 0. A lot of people don't think about it because that's expected of a storage system, but it's not always the case. So there is a lot of engineering that goes around the reliability of data, especially in border cases and border scenarios. Another one would be performance, that people typically they don't even understand if their system is slow. So that's one thing in terms of latency, in terms of throughput and IOPS. Many modern applications would struggle, and you would think that it's the application is too bloated or it doesn't perform for whatever reason. And in many cases, it's just lacking the performance needed. And that could be a bottleneck between a storage and network and the hypervisor, CPU and RAM. So it needs triage, but basically that's something that a lot of people take for granted, and that would reflect in any part of an application, be it the database or loading time of a website, etc., etc. So,
would you like to add something, Giles?
Yeah, I mean, I think your question, any must-haves? I mean, yeah, performance, reliability. I mean, they're obviously must-haves, but bear in mind everybody has set different demands about what they expect in terms of performance, what they expect in terms of reliability. Other than that, I mean, you know, no is the short answer, because everybody's got a different view of the world in terms of what they want from their storage platform. You know, do they need that strong integration point with a REST API? Do they need the level of fault tolerance that's offered by another vendor? So I don't think it's easy to distill it down to these are the things that every platform must have.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that maybe 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, the SAN storage was the industry standard. And as you said, that now companies are moving more to software-only products. How hard is it for a company which has been using like traditional or legacy now storage to move to a software-only product? And are there any barriers which these companies are having?
I'll dive in to start with, and I'm sure Boyan will share some more detailed conversations about that. Yeah, I mean, the main barrier that customers are facing is the legacy relationships they have with the existing SAN providers, who are desperate to hold on to their traditional model. I mean, for me, and this is not just storage, this is networking, all sorts of different areas. The software-defined model is that's a given, that's happening, right? And if you're a vendor who's holding on, selling overpriced hardware to claim that it's a better solution than a more modern software-defined approach, I think your days are numbered. And I think we will see the more traditional vendors, in fact, we do see this already, starting to move more to a software-defined model, because that's really where the value is, right?
Absolutely. To step on that, I think companies today are they're looking for a software-first solution. You still have the hardware component, but they're looking for intelligence in that solution. So they're thinking around business needs that are very diverse, that are changing way too fast. So they're looking for something that's very agile, and software solutions just happen to be these solutions. Of course, barriers of entry or to adoption, there are plenty. Giles mentioned a couple. There are also some hardware dependencies. For example, in storage, traditionally storage has been running on a separate fiber channel network. Now, if you want to adopt an SDS or software-defined storage solution, it typically runs on standard Ethernet alongside your compute traffic. But then this means that you need to have enough bandwidth. Sometimes you need to do migrations. In other cases, when you decide to adopt a software-defined storage solution, you are faced with a project to revamp your entire IT stack, meaning in many cases, companies are changing hypervisor. So then you're looking at migration of all your VMs or workloads from, let's say, Zen server CloudStack solution with a fiber channel SAN to a KVM CloudStack solution with an Ethernet software-defined storage and software-defined networking. And these are all fairly complex migrations that have to be well kind of designed and implemented. And these might be kind of like a roadblock to the inevitable end game of running as much as possible in software, and the magic being there.
You both mentioned that speed and reliability are key factors when you're choosing storage. And as far as we know, StorPool is among the fastest storage solutions on the market. Boyan, can you tell us a little bit more about StorPool as a storage solution?
Sure. So StorPool is a solution that focuses on block level workloads, although we can do file and object to a lesser extent, but we're aiming to be the best block storage solution on the market. Further, we're specializing in high performance storage. We typically deliver systems that are 100 microseconds of latency, so quite fast with millions of IOPS. And we do that by software, the StorPool software that's running on standard servers. It can run alongside applications in a so-called hyper-converged manner, or it can run as standalone on standard servers that are just presenting fast and reliable shared storage to compute workloads running CloudStack. It's deeply integrated with StorPool, and it's one of the companies that also has a very mature and also very advanced storage platform that can span several performance tiers. We're best in primary storage, but we can also cover slower HDD storage, primary HDD storage, and backup. And we also do a lot of functionality out of the box for disaster recovery, business continuity, backup. So it's quite feature rich. In terms of spread of customers, we're operating in globally. So we have customers in about 30 countries. A less known fact is StorPool is one of the most profitable storage companies in the world. So a solid entity coming from Europe. It's kind of a business that is cash flow positive and growing and doing its best to service customers in the best possible way. And I think an interesting and important thing that is rather unique on the market, our solution comes with a fully managed service. So in many cases, we help customers to transition to the software-defined world by providing support for their systems and reducing the learning curve, so they can hop on to a faster, better, cheaper alternative in less time and less effort.
And what type of companies are using StorPool? Can you mention a few names?
Sure. So StorPool is typically a good fit for large-scale environments, typically IaaS and public clouds, larger enterprises in the CloudStack community. We have several large-scale customers. One is a company that's doing VDI. It's called Giles. So they provide desktop as a service. We have a large telco in Pakistan. It's the largest telco that's running CloudStack, and a number of other companies. But typically, there are public clouds or larger enterprises that need fast, scalable infrastructure that's designed for CloudStack environments and is coming with a proper level of mission-critical 24/7 support.
Let's discuss a bit the end-user perspective. If a company is building infrastructure as a service, how important is, according to both of you, that the storage solution is well integrated with the cloud management system and with other components?
I'll start you with that one, Yvette. I think, so there's two levels. If we start from the CloudStack perspective, right, that's the orchestrator that's going to pull everything together into your IaaS environment. CloudStack has two different types of storage. It has primary storage and it has secondary storage. Secondary, not going to go into that too much here. That's for sort of static artifacts like templates and that sort of thing. But the primary storage is where the real issue is. That's where the hypervisors are connected to. And CloudStack has two models. It has a pretty open model. Basically, it can use anything that presents NFS, CloudStack can use. But we call that unmanaged storage, and that's relatively dumb. So CloudStack can't orchestrate that storage platform underneath. It's just taking a whole load of space, assigning it to hypervisors, and off it goes. The really interesting bit is when we get a storage platform that we can orchestrate. StorPool being a great example. There are others. There are lots of others, but I want to sort of call Boyan and his team out for, they've worked really well in the open source community to make sure they've got that integration. And what that does for organizations, it opens up extra pieces of functionality and products they can take to market that wouldn't be possible if that storage couldn't be orchestrated. Also, lets us start to have a more intelligent conversation about issues that we have in multi-tenant cloud, like noisy neighbor and that sort of thing. That's a lot more addressable if we have a storage platform that we can integrate. And finally, we can use that storage platform a lot more efficiently than if we're just using effectively dumb NFS that's presented to us. That's from my view, but I'm interested to see your view on that, Boyan.
I would say that having a deep integration with the cloud management platform is a deal breaker when choosing a storage solution. And we're also, as you can imagine, as a leading vendor, we have several integrations. Like we're working deeply and in the CloudStack community, but we're integrated with other solutions as well. And we see that in any ecosystem that we're servicing. For example, from the point of the customer, if you're a cloud company and you just need specific feature set. You want to do QoS and eliminate or reduce the impact of noisy neighbors. So QoS is for quality of service. You need very good snapshot capabilities that would result in space savings. So that would materially impact the total cost of ownership of the solution. The API that Giles mentioned is pivotal for integrating it into your billing and provisioning systems and sometimes in the support part of the business. So unless you have a very, a deeply integrated solution with intelligent integration, you're, maybe 2/3 of the advantages of a very strong storage platform are not available to you. So it doesn't make any sense basically to use a system that's not deeply integrated, and we see that across all ecosystems we're playing in. Basically, solutions that are not well integrated, they're just not making it to the short list of options that customers are looking to choose from.
I think that Boyan already mentioned some of the must-have features of a good storage solution, but are there any other features which are required for most of the companies?
Yeah, I mean, again, those underlying things of performance, reliability, and the cost, the graph with cost. Again, scalability is the thing. The cloud providers are people who, they plan for scale, but they often can't predict the scale, right? And often number of our customers have had, we've sat with them and they predicted where they're going to be in 12 months time, and then they've smashed it, right? And they've gone up an order of magnitude in time because it's just worked. Their offerings worked, and they've attacked the market well. What they don't want to be is in a situation where they've got an unpredictable cost model for their storage if that happens. So to me, there's three things: it's scalability, scalability, and scalability, or the ability to plan and predict around that. That's probably a more detailed answer.
And Boyan, how is StorPool ensuring scalability? What are you offering in this direction?
StorPool was designed with scale in mind from the beginning. So unlike pretty much any other architecture or implementation of fully distributed architecture, it was designed to just scale, starting from 3 nodes, because it's a shared storage system. So you need to kind of have reliability for the data. But then it scales and scales. So it can scale in terms of online scalability with just adding more SSDs in a given server. As I said, our building block is a standard server, or adding more servers or adding racks with servers. The system just scales and it does it automatically. It does it online. So you can have a loaded SAP or Oracle database running on top, and it would continue to scale the system. And that's a lot of engineering. It sounds very trivial, right? You just add nodes and it just works and rebalances, but the engineering needed to make it smooth and to work well, and to such sizes, we can do hundreds and thousands of nodes. So it's rather powerful platform to run on. And I'll also add something for your previous question that is often overlooked in a storage solution, is how it handles generational change of hardware. So that hardware lifecycle management becomes paramount in the case that your company scales and grows because you have plenty of hardware, or just because of maturity of the company or the project. 10 years, if it's running for 10 years, it likely has 3 to 7 generations of hardware, sometimes running along each other, and how you do hardware replacement is vital for a system. And that's one of the beauties of software-defined systems, especially software-defined storage, because your data is abstracted from the underlying hardware. It now lives in the software layer, and then you can have a river of commodity hardware flowing underneath, which is a big factor for larger customers. And we have an interesting case study with Atos, who chose us for, that was one of their primary reasons. Unfortunately, they're not a CloudStack user, but that just shows.
For now, they're not.
For now, yeah. But that just shows that if you have scale or just several years and you have to deal with a lot of pain in hardware lifecycle management, so that's also a underlooked but very important part of a storage solution to support.
Talking for software, it's interesting to hear your point of view on another topic, and that's the open source thing. So CloudStack is entirely an open source solution, and as far as we know, StorPool is a proprietary solution. So do you think that they can both work in a symbiosis? And should companies search for only open source solutions, or in some specific cases, they can choose another type of services?
I'm going to have a slightly biased view on that, because I believe the open source model is ultimately the best way to deliver business and economic value through software, and the best way to collaborate. But we all know not all software is open source, right? And if a proprietary model works for the users and is an efficient way of developing, there's lots of very successful proprietary software companies around the world. one thing, whether we're talking here about two products, we're talking about Apache CloudStack and StorPool storage. For me, one of those is open source, one isn't open source, I believe. But the important thing for me is when it comes to integrating is organizations who are prepared to adopt the open source mindset, right? So it doesn't matter if your software, and we have this with lots of vendors who want to integrate with CloudStack. It doesn't matter if your software is how you license that to your customers, but are you going to collaborate in a good open source way and be prepared to work with all of the various people in the community? And I'll openly call StorPool out and say they've been amazing. They've been a really good supporter of the Apache CloudStack project from the moment they first popped up and said, hey, we want to integrate, and they get it, right? But I would always default to I think open source is best, but I'll let Boyan explain why it maybe isn't always best.
Sure. So that's a bit political discussion, but I'll put my customer hat on, and from a customer perspective, the thing that's important is the solution working well? Is that software working well? Is that product working well for me, for my use cases, for my needs? Is the price point right? And the discussion from wearing this hat is, if I have to do an open source solution, I can edit the code, but maybe 1-2% of the companies that are using open source are actually doing that. In the end, they need to do their business. They sell virtual machines to end customers, or they service their teams in the other part of the business, providing their infrastructure services to them. So they need fast and reliable system that's well supported, that doesn't go down, that's easy to migrate, easy to upgrade, easy to manage, all these things. And if it happens that the tool that would do the job best in terms of both quality, capabilities of the solution and price of the solution, if it's open source, you do that, and then obviously you hire the team, or to do that. If it's a proprietary solution, it typically comes with the team bundled already, like the support bundled and the implementation services. So I think it's more of a decision of what is the thing that would work best for you. From my vendor hat on, I think it's also a largely, it's mostly business decision discussion of whether you go open source or not. For example, in the CloudStack community, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you go and say, I want an open source storage platform that's very fast, very well integrated, very scalable, with a very good support, you would be defaulting to all the incumbents, the 2- and 3-letter vendor companies, and they're all proprietary. And then you would use them because they work for you. That's what you need: fast, reliable, scalable, well-supported solution at a price point that makes the business case work. So I'm not very opinionated here. I think everybody's like making a decision of how to deliver their services and what to choose as a customer.
I think that there is a bit to add on the end there, Boyan. Obviously, it's something I feel quite strongly about, but when we were speaking earlier, this inevitability around stuff becoming software defined, right? I see that there is a long-term inevitability in the software industry of things becoming open source, and that is, the way you describe it there, and I completely get that, but these two things don't have to be mutually exclusive, right? So there's people can have the benefits of open source and a vendor that wraps around it, and the key driver for that we see in large organizations is around the longevity of that platform, right? So one thing as a vendor you can do, you're in control of the roadmap, right? Yes, the customer trusts you to make sure their platform's reliable and it's working and it's supported and it's going to be innovated on. But large organizations sometimes get a bit worried about where is that innovation going to go, and if you do a massive pivot as a vendor one way or the other, then they're tied into that organization. Open source removes that, right? Because it puts some balance, it puts some democracy around the software slightly, and we're seeing increasingly that even traditional enterprise organizations are liking this because they're scared of vendors pivoting in one direction or another. So I know it's working for you at the moment, but I just predict sort of long term, I think that's going to be something a movement we're going to start to see in the industry.
I think we're seeing that movement. Don't get me wrong, StorPool is using a lot of open source technology. Our background as DNA of the company and the people working it is entirely open source only, I would say. However, it's also a business decision of how you monetize the solution, how you gather enough funds so you can actually propel and do innovation. And I think both approaches have advantage and disadvantage. I see more enterprises adopting open source software, and as we're very, well established in open source, that's a good thing for us. But also, if you have a project that's of interest to a couple, 3, 4 very big organizations, they would hire 200-300 developers working on that project each. And then, these 3-4 companies would steer the roadmap in a direction that all the rest, don't have the scale or sophistication to use. So in any case, you have a trade-off of, these things can go in a direction that's not where you as a user wanted to go. But I think they would coexist. I think, we'll be seeing a shift towards open source software, but in my view, it's still slow. As much as Giles and I would like to see more of that, still I think, at least in dollar terms, in terms of penetration of larger organizations or the majority of organizations is still a small bit.
At the end, at least for me, there are 2 factors which are the most important, and these are the reliability and the predictability. Can you tell us how StorPool and how CloudStack together are delivering on the reliability and predictability side?
I think it comes down to 3 things. One is the cloud management platform in CloudStack and the capabilities that are built in CloudStack, and it's rather mature and sophisticated platform, so it has these features. Then StorPool on the other side as well is done, is developed and has, years and years of engineering around reliability and scalability. And then you have the integration between the 2 pieces, because if the 2 pieces can do it together, and they don't talk to each other well, it's not going to happen. And I think we're working quite well with the CloudStack community and also with StorPool. So we're very happy with their support and their responsiveness. So I think that is the way that you guarantee reliability in a system. It's top down, bottom up, and all in between.
And I think certainly from the CloudStack perspective, we have quite a limited scope as a project, and we don't see our job to do absolutely everything in the stack. We've got quite a defined layer of the stack. For example, there are other large IaaS projects and products which try and do their own block storage thing. We don't try and do that. We work with people like integrate with people like StorPool. And one of the reasons for that is by having that tightly defined scope, our reliability, our quality is very high as a open source technology. We're not trying to revolutionize. We're gently evolving the technology. I mean, as an IaaS orchestration platform, that involves a lot of work because there are a lot of storage platforms, there's a lot of networks, there's a lot of compute platforms, hypervisors, things that we have to orchestrate, which are constantly evolving themselves. And we have to make sure CloudStack can expose the functionality of all of those underlying components and wrap it up into one single REST API. But by not being over ambitious with our scope, we have a very, very high level of reliability and quality. And that's why we're seeing increasingly, large organizations who really need to rely on a platform like this are choosing CloudStack, right? It's a gentle evolution instead of a revolution.
To add to that, Giles, something that you might not be seeing directly, but we see because we're working in a given number of ecosystems, there are also a pickup to CloudStack adoption from other larger companies, in terms of coming from different ecosystems. So that's also a good trend, and I think companies become more sophisticated as users. So they are more educated, they ask the right questions, and they make a better judgment today of what technology would fit best for their use case. And again, to the point of Giles, they're looking for solutions that are very good in the KPIs or the parameters that matter for them. And StorPool is in a similar manner. We are focusing on block level storage, although we can cover other types of storage to a lesser extent. We're keeping the scope fairly narrow, so we can be best in class in something rather than average in everything.
Yeah.
Let's finish up with some advice. What will be your advice to the companies which are building their system now and they want to have a future-proof system which will last for the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, get my crystal ball out, Yvette. I've said this, brought this subject up given this as an answer for a few of your questions, Yvette, but yeah, scalability, right? So as your organization goes, whichever way it goes, you've got to make sure that you're going to be able to continue to consume the storage at the correct price point. I also think, platforms that are clearly evolving from a viewpoint of their integration, what they expose through their API, because, we don't know today what users of an IaaS environment are going to demand in 2 years' time. So we've got to, I would look at a vendor who are clearly evolving in terms of their functionality, but are also making sure that that's all exposed through their API to give the orchestration layer, the bit that we do, to give that the opportunity to be able to orchestrate it. And I think Boyan touched on this earlier, in terms of dealing with hardware innovation, which is moving so quickly at the moment. Is some of the biggest changes I think that are going to happen in storage over the next 5-10 years are going to be about incredible developments in hardware. You've got to make sure you've got a vendor who's sat on top of that hardware, is able to exploit it and deal with that innovation.
I agree with that. And it's a complex, it's a very tricky question, because on one hand, you want a platform that's very versatile and can help you, depending on where things start to move, in what direction, because they're very dynamic, both on software, on use case level, there are new applications that appear, etc., etc. But on the other hand, you need best-in-class tools to have an edge compared to everybody else on the market as an user. For example, we have a customer that's using StorPool as the best platform for running storage workloads, and they're using another vendor, again, software company, for doing file and object. So they basically said, okay, this is the best platform for running this set of workloads. The other one is the best for running other set of workloads. And obviously, both storage companies are working on implementing support for new hardware, for new versions of CloudStack and other software components. So it's something that I would say a company that's developing, you can see development in the vendor. You can see that the company is trying to support the latest and greatest technologies, not for the sake of the latest and greatest. It just shows that this company is forward-thinking company and a good partner to have, especially in the software-defined domain. Because software is so flexible, so malleable, it's easy for us to add support for the latest generation of hardware whenever it becomes available, which, for example, with a SAN or a storage array, a storage box, is not the case. You would wait for 6 to 18 months to get hold of the latest hardware to become available. So from this point of view, I would be looking at, what is the support of the company, the type of components, the roadmap, the vision. These would be things that I would be using as an user to judge what platform, what vendor to work with. So I can have not a future-proof cloud, because in 5 years, in 10 years, nobody knows how the IT stack would look like. But to have a partner, then I can rely on that this partner is going to do the necessary or develop the product and capabilities regardless of where the wind blows.
So if I need to make a summary, the advice is just search for technologies which will be here on the market in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell which ones. That's a funny part. That when StorPool was a younger company, they were asking, what if StorPool, if something happens to StorPool? And meanwhile, we've seen, tens of companies going out of business or getting acquired. Even the number one in storage, which was EMC, got acquired, and we're still here, right? So it's not always easy to judge, but I think it's the summary would be look at a company that's innovating constantly, and that would give you some future proof, regardless of where the technical stream goes.
Anything to add, Giles?
No, I completely agree with what Boyan said. I mean, obviously, every vendor is going to tell you that they're going to be the best, and they're still going to be around, and they're going to be the most innovative. But often reading between the lines of that, looking at where companies are spending their time, where vendors are spending their time, and one thing I always look out for, and this isn't just storage as well, this is any vendor, is looking for organizations who are actually jumping around too much and just following whatever the latest hype is to get a route to market, and not focusing on their core stuff. So somebody who
storage.
Say again, sorry.
Blockchain storage, and all the
hype. Exactly, and that's an extreme. Well, that's one that everybody's jumping on. But yeah, I mean, companies, if you see they've got a record of just following whatever the latest thing isn't necessary innovation. They're following, right? The clever innovation is the stuff that actually has to be explained to you sometimes in terms of why this is significant, why it's important. And I think, I'd love to do this analysis, look back at a series of vendors, those who have been really successful. They will be the ones who have been quietly innovating on the right things, not just choosing whatever the latest hype is. I think that's a really important thing generally with selecting vendors.
So thank you very much, Giles and Boyan, for joining me for this nice interview. And I really hope we managed to give good advice to companies which are building their cloud.
Thanks, Sirett.
Thanks for having us.